Hey everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Jedi Jams podcast. This is going to be a little bit of a shorter episode. I don't really have too much to talk about, just one topic this week. But like I've been saying, please make sure that if you do want to hear me talk about something, please leave a comment and definitely try to use that in the next week's show. Also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and also give that like button a hit if you like what you hear. Alright, so moving into our topic for today, we are talking about the 5 actors that I would like to see in some form of Star Wars, whether it be a TV show, a movie, that these actors could get involved in. Not necessarily animation, I would like to see it be a live action appearance. These are not in any particular order, these are just 5 actors who I have really been thinking about I'd like to see in a Star Wars project. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go ahead and start this with Kit Harington. Obviously, loved Game of Thrones, and I love Kit Harington in Game of Thrones. Goes without saying that I would love to see him in Star Wars. I'd love to see him, the role that I would love to see him in is as some sort of an Old Republic Jedi. I'd like to see him in that role because he's shown that he can play somebody who is committed to an ideal, committed to a cause, very much like the Jedi are in Star Wars, and I'd really like to see him portray that. I think he'd do a very, very good job at it. If the universe of Star Wars is going in the direction I believe it's going with Disney, they are going to look at doing some stuff way further in the past, meaning before the prequels, hopefully thousands and thousands of years before the prequels, because there's as we know from the old EU, such a rich pool of stories to be able to just pluck things from. And it doesn't have to necessarily be the same stuff. Like, you can just pluck ideas, pluck characters from the old EU. The sequel trilogy basically did it with Ben Solo, Kylo Ren. The idea that Han and Leia's son would turn to the dark side, that was in the old EU. So I could totally see them taking some Old Republic stuff. And Kit Harington, to me, would just be the perfect Jedi. Somebody who would be committed to the code and committed to protecting the galaxy. I think that he would portray that very, very well. Not really much else to say about that. Moving into the next actor that I would really like to see on a Star Wars property. I have heard this from other people before, but I believe that Tom Hiddleston, probably know him better as Loki from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I would love to see him play a young Palpatine, if they would go back and tell the story of how Sheev Palpatine became Darth Sidious, how he became this incredibly powerful Sith Lord. You could even bring Darth Plagueis into the mix, and you could see how he learned from his master. I think Tom Hiddleston would be able to bring the energy that Ian McDiarmid brought to the character. I also really think that Tom Hiddleston has the look to pull off a young Palpatine. I think that he looks similar to what Ian, or to at least what we think that Palpatine would look like as a younger man. I would just love to see him play that. But if not that role, there would be so many other roles that he would be able to play in Star Wars. But yes, Tom Hiddleston would be another one that I would absolutely love to see show up in the Star Wars universe. Moving on to another actor that I would really love to see, that I've heard a lot of people talk about, is Sebastian Stan, who most of you probably know as Bucky Barnes or the Winter Soldier from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Sebastian Stan, his look is uncanny to young Mark Hamill's look. So everybody is saying he needs to play a young Luke Skywalker. Now, as far as a young Luke Skywalker goes, I would say a story set between Episode 6 and Episode 7. Something close to the end of Return of the Jedi, but not so close that you would still think of Mark Hamill. They could do some stuff with Sebastian's look, maybe age him a little bit, some makeup to make him look to make him mesh a little bit more with Mark's look from that movie. But I think that if they could somehow get him to play Luke, and we could tell some of those stories between episodes 6 and 7, some of those story points that we were talking about in the last podcast, I think that would be absolutely amazing. If we could see Luke traveling the galaxy looking for the different Jedi texts and the different Jedi artifacts, I think that would be really, really cool. And Sebastian Stan, as far as I'm concerned, is a great actor. I haven't seen any reason to think that he wouldn't be able to pull it off. I really enjoyed his character in the MCU. Bucky, the Winter Soldier, is one of my favorite characters. So definitely would love to see him in Star Wars, particularly as young Luke, just because of his look. I think that it would fit really, really well. Moving on to another actor, and we're down to 2 left. This is probably because I've been watching way too much Jumanji lately with my kids, but I would absolutely love to see Dwayne Johnson in Star Wars. Just as like a bounty hunter or a smuggler, or just, I could just see him being somebody who doesn't take crap and kicks the crap out of everybody who tries to get in his way. He's just got that I'm gonna knock your teeth in look to him, but he's also got kind of that cool guy vibe where it's like, yeah, I'm a cool guy, I'm nice, but don't mess with me. I really, really like what he brings to the table in his movies. I know that a lot of his characters are usually the same, but I think a character of his type, The Rock, so to speak, I think that could fit into Star Wars very, very well. Dare I say it, like a Dash Rendar sort of character. I'm not saying that he should be Dash Rendar per se. For those of you who don't know who Dash Rendar is, he was a character who was introduced in the old expanded universe. He was a smuggler with the likes of Han Solo, and he was introduced in the Shadows of the Empire storyline, which was a video game, comics, and it was set between episodes 5 and 6. If he played somebody along those lines, I could definitely see the types of characters that he plays in movies definitely working in Star Wars, and I think that would be very, very interesting to see. He also has a bit of a comedy edge to him as well, and obviously Star Wars does have its humor. I think that a lot of his comedic elements could fit very well into Star Wars, so physical comedy, his delivery of dialogue, I think that it could all work. And like I said, maybe it's just because I'm watching too much Jumanji with the kids, but Dwayne Johnson is really sticking out in my mind as somebody who I would like to see in Star Wars at some point. And you know, some people just don't want to be in Star Wars. Like, for example, Leonardo DiCaprio turned down being in the prequels. Now, it wasn't necessarily because he didn't want to be in it. He just didn't want to take that leap. It's what he said. He didn't feel like he was able to take that leap and jump in to Star Wars at that point. But he was being looked at for the role of Anakin Skywalker. That was George's original vision, was having Leo DiCaprio play that part. And I often think to myself, how would the prequels have been different? Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love the prequels and I love Hayden Christensen, but what could Leo have brought to the prequels? I don't know. It's something that we'll never know. So, another famous actor who turned down a role in Star Wars, Al Pacino. He didn't understand the script. He was he was asked to audition for Han Solo, but he didn't understand the script, and he just didn't feel like it was for him. Another actor was Kurt Russell. He actually auditioned for it, but then he turned it down because he got a job in, I believe it was a TV show. I can't remember exactly what the show was called, but yeah, Kurt Russell, that could have been interesting if he would have played Han Solo. And then one of the actors who I thought was interesting that turned down a role was Christopher Lee. Turned down the role of Tarkin in the original trilogy. But then when he realized how big Star Wars had become, he came back and played Count Dooku in the prequels, a character who I personally really like. I know that some people feel that he was kind of pointless, but if you do go back and watch it, it is a nice character to have in the stories, and his character is very fleshed out in the Clone Wars series, which I think adds a lot more depth to the movies. Not saying that it is always a good thing for a TV show to have to come along and flesh things out. I'm just saying that it definitely helped with it. But back to what I was saying, Christopher Lee was one of those actors who was like, oh, well, maybe I should jump in this time. But yeah, he was originally looked at for Tarkin, and then that's when Peter Cushing came in. The Van Helsing to Christopher Lee's Dracula came in and played Tarkin. All right, so enough about the actors who decided not to do Star Wars. So moving on to the fifth actor that I would like to see in Star Wars. I've seen this all over the internet. I know that this is something that a lot of people have wanted. It's not going to be a surprise for some people. I would love to see Keanu Reeves in a Star Wars somehow. But mostly, I would love to see him play the character of Revan. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with Revan, Revan is another expanded universe character whose original stories were made legends, which means that they're not in the actual continuity of Star Wars anymore. Revan was a Jedi Knight who led the Republic against the Mandalorians long, long ago in the Old Republic. This was actually something that he did, if I'm recalling correctly, this is something that he did against the will of the Jedi Council. Him and his apprentice led a crusade, so to speak, against the Mandalorians to protect the Republic, because at that point Mandalore was rising up and trying to colonize a lot of different systems, basically trying to overtake the Old Republic. So Revan goes in, quells the fighting. Eventually he ends up turning to the dark side when he meets the Sith Emperor Vitiate. I know I'm probably losing a couple people here, but just follow along. But he ends up turning to the dark side with his apprentice who was with him. Eventually, he ends up losing his memory, and he comes back, has no memory, and is being retrained in the Jedi arts by the Jedi who found him. And eventually, he realizes that he is the monster that so many people have been talking about, the Sith Lord Revan, who so many people have talked about. And then basically, the choice is his to either become the monster again or kill the monster and become the Jedi. I just think that as far as his look in the Old Republic games, I think Keanu Reeves would fit that very, very well. And I think that's something that Keanu Reeves could pull off very, very well. After seeing John Wick, I just can't imagine really anybody else playing Revan. Keanu plays unhinged, yet stable, broken, yet put together so well. I think he would be perfect, not just for his looks. I think it would be his acting skill as well. And I know that that's something that he's not always been known for, but he is an action movie star, and I think that if you made an action movie based around Revan, he would have to be your choice. Now, obviously, if he didn't play Revan, I would love to see him as just some sort of badass mercenary, like a John Wick in space. Of course I would love to see that, but I think Darth Revan would be a really, really interesting story to tell. I'm going to throw in an extra one here just because I still got a little bit of time. Another person that I would absolutely love to see in Star Wars is Tom Hardy. Tom Hardy, for those of you who don't know, he played Bane in The Dark Knight Rises. And funny enough, that's actually the character that I want him to play in Star Wars. I would love for Tom Hardy to play Darth Bane. Darth Bane is the Sith Lord who is responsible for creating the Rule of Two. The story goes that the Sith, at one point, were so dysfunctional with so much infighting that there was no way that they were ever going to defeat the Jedi, and eventually they just ended up destroying themselves. Now, I can't remember exactly if Bane orchestrated it or if he was just the one who survived it, but Bane was the only Sith left when the dust settled. And thus, he decided that to avoid the infighting, there would only ever be two Sith. A master and an apprentice. One to have the power and one to crave the power. I think seeing the formation of the Rule of Two with Tom Hardy playing Bane would be absolutely amazing. He has already proven that he can act without showing his mouth or most of his face when he played Bane, so I could only imagine what he would be able to do with this character, having use of his entire face, depending on how they depict it, because I know that in the old EU, he was maskless. But in the Clone Wars, when you see his spirit, he's wearing a mask. I don't know. I think that he could pull it off either way, but there was my bonus extra, Tom Hardy. I would love to see him play Darth Bane. So, unfortunately, that's going to wrap it up. That's really the only thing that I had to talk about. Please leave in the comments any actors that you would like to see in a Star Wars movie. I'd be very, very interested to see who your picks would be. And please, once again, remember, if you want to put topics to talk about in the comment section, please do so. I'm always open to talking about anything Star Wars, so please leave a comment, hit that like button, don't forget to subscribe if you're not already subscribed, and I guess all I have to say is until next time, may the Force be with you.